Taiwan is gearing up for its next presidential election on January 13th. The stakes in this vote are higher than ever before as ties grow increasingly strained between the self-ruled island and mainland China. Whoever is elected Taiwan's president will also signal where U.S.-China relations are headed.
当前，台湾正面临着和平与战争、繁荣与衰退两条道路、两种前景的关键抉择。
But how have relations soured to this extent? In 1992, a political consensus was reached by Beijing and Taiwan, which at the time was ruled by the Kuomintang. Under what is now known as the 92 Consensus, both parties have agreed there is only one China, but they could disagree over what that means. It was assumed the mainland would define it as the People's Republic of China, and Taiwan would define it as the Republic of China. To Beijing, the 92 Consensus has been the basis of cross-strait ties. But Taiwan's economy suffered from a global economic downturn during the KMT's 8 years in power, and many voters felt the close ties with Beijing benefited businesses more than ordinary people. Here's how one expert explained it at the time.
The current government has maintained a rapprochement policy with China, but many voters in Taiwan consider that rapprochement has not been able to bring prosperity to Taiwan's economy and more dignity and participation in international community.
That year, the independence-leaning Democratic Progressive Party swept into power with current President Tsai Ing-wen in the top job.
改变台湾，一票都不能少。明天，人民把权力拿回来。明天。 我们把台湾赢回来，好不好？明天我们一起用选票，让这个总统府真正属于台湾人民，好不好？
Tsai's election as the island's top leader brought cross-strait relations to an impasse. She refused to accept the 92 Consensus, while Beijing regarded her as a separatist. Tensions only intensified when Tsai won a second term in office with a record 8 million votes in 2020. Her campaign focused on safeguarding the island's democracy and raising fears that Taiwan would be controlled by Beijing. She used Hong Kong's 2019 anti-government protests to reject any notion of a one country, two systems policy for reunification.
我要问现场我们所有的好朋友，有人要战争吗？没有人要战争。 我们是不是要和平？大家都要和平。看看香港，想想台湾，我们不要像香港式的和平，我们要的是有尊严的和平。大家说对不对？
Tsai has reached her two-term limit, so she cannot run in this coming election. Experts say cross-strait relations remain a major concern to Taiwanese voters.
主要候选人。 他们对于未来的两岸关系呢，是抱持的不同的一些观点。那么有些是主张要跟这个中国大陆方面保持比较友好的态度。那么有一些是主张我们要维持我们台湾的一个这个主权。那么跟中国大陆方面的话，那么就是不能够接受包含9·2共识在内的一些看法。 所以呢，对于哪一个候选人当选之后，是不是可能对于两岸关系呢造成进一步的这个紧张关系，或者是和缓等等，那么都是为大家所关切的。
Beijing sees Taiwan as part of China to be reunited by force if necessary. Most countries, including the US, do not recognize Taiwan as an independent state, but Washington is opposed to any attempt to take the self-ruled island by force and is committed to arming Taiwan. An October poll by the Taiwanese government's Mainland Affairs Council showed only about 7% of Taiwan's people supported reunification. In comparison, 25% were in favor of independence. But support for either Taiwanese unification or independence had both dropped compared with the same period ahead of the previous election. It showed the vast majority of Taiwanese people wanted neither option. They simply wanted to maintain Taiwan's status the way it is, not formally independent, and not unified with mainland China. The frontrunner in this election is DPP candidate and current Vice President William Lai Ching-te. But he only has about 30% support among voters, mainly the party's longtime supporters, according to opinion polls. Like Tsai, his campaign has focused on raising fears of a takeover by Beijing.
中国要并吞台湾是他们的国家政策，争取世界霸权，不是哪一个政党或哪一个人有什么主张所引起。
But it's not clear if using the same strategy this time will help Lai win. He has faced difficulties winning over middle-of-the-road voters, partly because of fears the DPP's path of confrontation with Beijing could lead Taiwan towards war with mainland China. Beijing has repeatedly criticized Lai as pro-independence, along with his vice presidential running mate Xiao Bi-kim, Taiwan's former de facto ambassador to the United States.
民进党推出这样一组危险的独配，只会毒害台湾同胞利益扶持，毒害台海和平稳定，毒害台湾前途命运。
Their biggest opponent is the KMT's Hou Yui, who seeks to reduce tensions and restore dialogue with Beijing while also protecting Taiwan's self-rule and democracy. The KMT has been trying to narrow the gap between Hou and the DPP's Lai, even calling on KMT supporters living on the mainland to return to the island for the vote, which must be cast in person.
所以在民进党积极的中间，因为台独的引战啊，我反对一国两制，也反对台独。
This year, a candidate from a relatively new party, the Taiwan People's Party, has also emerged as a contender. Ko Wen-je, a former mayor of Taipei, is mostly favored by young Taiwanese who do not like either the DPP or KMT, but he is trailing behind his two opponents. Ko has shown a more diplomatic inclination in approaching Taiwan's relationships with both mainland China and the US.
我希望台湾是中美沟通的桥梁，而不是中美对抗的棋子。
The Taiwan issue has long been a major flashpoint of Beijing's relations with Washington. The US is bound by law to provide Taiwan with defensive military equipment. But more than just a military obligation, Taiwan in recent years has also been seen by the US as an important partner to counter mainland China's growing assertiveness and influence in the region. The US and China have long fought for technological dominance and clashed over their global trade involving reciprocal tariffs. Both Washington and Beijing need a reliable supply of semiconductors, an industry led globally by Taiwan. Semiconductors are used in most smartphones, computers, cars, F-35 fighter jets, and even NASA's Perseverance rover that landed on Mars. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company recorded a market share of more than 50% in the whole global semiconductor foundry market in 2023. If China gains more influence over Taiwan, the US claims that it would pose a threat to global supply chains and jeopardize American and global technology security. Former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi even stopped by TSMC during her controversial 2022 visit to Taiwan. That visit, the first by such a high-ranking US politician in many years, angered Beijing, which saw it as a challenge to Chinese sovereignty. Shortly after, Chinese military aircraft started crossing the Taiwan Straits median line, an unofficial barrier between the mainland and Taiwan.
一旦台海因为台独或外部势力介入而爆发战争，台湾变成战场，那台湾老百姓就会裹挟变成炮灰。
所以当然就世界关注，尤其现在世界上在发生战争嘛，所以中国的一个威胁，它不是只有对台湾，它可能对世界上的民主阵营都是一个威胁。
Ahead of the vote, President Tsai has reversed her party's previous frequent warnings about the prospect of war and sought to play down such fears. Opinion polls show the DPP is struggling to increase support from voters, and it could be a neck-and-neck race. Many voters are now worried there could be a war if tensions escalate out of control.
I think the Chinese leadership at this juncture is overwhelmed by its internal challenges. And my thought is that perhaps this is not a time for them to consider a major invasion of Taiwan.
Regardless of who succeeds Tsai as Taiwan's next leader after the January 13th poll, ties between the island, mainland China, and the United States will have important consequences for the region and the world.